Good evening and welcome back to the Constitutional Corner. I'm your host, Craig McMichael. I'm here with Mark Hogan.
Howdy, everybody.
Tonight we're going to talk about the 9th and 10th Amendment of the Bill of Rights. Mark, let's start off with, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing really well. How are you doing?
I am here and I'm alive.
Tuesday evening. Another Tuesday evening with the Constitutional Corner, which is really weird because it's actually Saturday about noon, but it's the magic of television and YouTube. Anyway, the 9th Amendment. You want me to read that?
Yeah, let's see what they said about the 9th Amendment.
It's actually one of the most convoluted and not really referred to amendments there are. The 9th Amendment, the enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people.
Okay.
In other words, we didn't think of everything and we could never have written it down, so whatever we didn't list in the other amendments goes back to the people.
That's right? Exactly right. There was a lot of debate about this. Actually, Madison tried to insert some of these things in the Constitution when they were debating it again. You had the Federalist and the Anti-Federalist, and a lot of the Anti-Federalists didn't even think a Bill of Rights was necessary, even though they were limited government, because they understood that the Constitution was limited in its enumeration of powers.
And they thought that perhaps it would be even damaging to the whole thesis, because if you list them, then you can't possibly list them all.
Yeah, that was the concern. If you start listing powers, speech, religion, press, assembly, firearms, the right not to self-incriminate, not to quarter soldiers, if you started listing these rights out, then you're basically saying what your natural law and your rights are, but that means the government can violate the other ones. So they came up with the 9th Amendment, which a lot of people would call the rights not enumerated.
Right.
And the reason behind that is in Article 1, Section 8, you have the enumeration of the Constitution,
right,
the federal powers.
Here's what you can do.
And that's what the federal government is allowed to do, and those specific things only, and everything else, because the founders truly believed that the power of our government, the source of our freedom and liberty, came from the individual person. And so they were listening to the 9th Amendment to say that we have not listed all the rights you were given by your Creator, but just because we didn't have the time to list them down doesn't mean they don't exist, and it doesn't mean that you don't have a right to them.
Exactly. Just because it's unwritten, they're still your rights. Ready to move on to the 10th Amendment?
Yeah, let's see what the 10th says. I have a feeling it's something close to the 9th.
Well, they're very similar. It's like a brother-sister kind of thing. The 10th Amendment reads, "The powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively, or to the people." Right?
Okay, so what they're saying there is that anything that's not listed in Article 1, Section 8, it falls to the states.
Right.
The state authority. And you'll see this a lot in today's society, even though we don't believe it to be true. And this has morphed over time, with the Supremacy Clause that they put in the 14th Amendment. They've kind of taken away some rights from the states. And, a lot of people don't know historically. They'll argue that, the Civil War was fought over slavery, but it really was a states' rights issue.
It was states' rights, and it went back to the economy.
It went back to the economy, stupid. And it was about states' rights. And the easy way to see this is, imagine you're a farmer in Georgia or Alabama in the 1860s. Are you really going to go pick up a gun and go fight the North to protect slave owners when you don't have a slave and you don't own land that's on a plantation or getting crops from the slaves? These people adamantly believed in the rights of states to make these decisions. And while slavery was wrong and it needed to be abolished, and the Civil War solved that problem, it's still the South seceded for the states' rights issue. There's some things I want to talk about this Hamilton. And I make fun of Hamilton a lot because he turned out to be a big government. He's somebody that would make our modern day politicians proud.
Right.
But in Federalist 84, he said, "Why declare that things shall not be done, which there's no power to do?" What Hamilton's basically saying is, why write the Bill of Rights? Why do we have to declare what the government can't do when the actual Constitution doesn't give them the power to do it? And it fascinates me that maybe it's just not taught in school. Maybe people aren't seeking out the truth, or maybe sometimes I believe people just believe what they want to believe, and whatever political narrative suits whatever topic they're worried about.
Right. And the 9th and 10th can be viewed pretty ambiguous, and there's been instances of that being taken advantage of by one side or the other. Isn't that right?
That's right. And Madison, during the founding, one of the letters he wrote says, all power is originally vested and consequently derived from the people. And this is a prime example of one of the founders talking about you, the viewer watching at home, the two hosts sitting in these chairs. We, the people, have the power to control our destiny, our future, and our government. We should have the freedom to do what we want to do. And they've really hammered down on stifling freedom, taking our liberties away, an overbearing federal government that is controlling the states through blackmail, tax your money. We can't control taxes through the 16th Amendment, right. And then we'll give you your money back if you do certain things.
Do this and we'll give you that.
Yeah, so, let's talk about Article 1, Section 8 real quick, because if you want to understand government power, you need to understand what the founders gave them power for. So there are 18 enumerations in the Constitution. 6 of those, if I remember correctly, deal with military. Declare war, raise armies, navy, regulate military, call forth the militia, and organize the militia. Yeah. So the other 12, if you talk about what the government has the power to do, it has the power to tax and spend. It has the power for borrowing, commerce, immigration and bankruptcy, counterfeiting, power over seat of government, and what that means is the power over the capital and where the government is. And interesting story a lot of people don't know is D.C. used to be actually shaped as a diamond.
Oh, really?
It was George Washington's land, hence Washington, D.C., that he granted to the government to put the capital on. And during the Civil War, part of the land was in a southern state, and part of it was in a northern state.
How about that?
And so that's why it's split the way it is now. Interesting fact people don't know. Copyright and patents, create courts, basically establish judges in different court systems.
Lower courts.
Yeah, below the Supreme Court, that's correct. Define and punish, and the necessary and proper clause. And the founders really debated these. You can read during their notes from the Constitutional Convention and the Federalist Papers where they were describing the Constitution to the citizens of the state. They debated these powers, and it was supposed to be limited. They were terrified of an overbearing federal government with a standing army that could oppress the people.
Right. And they had just fought a war to get away from a centralized, overbearing government, telling all the states what to do. The states were actually, they weren't really countries, but they were separate entities, and they had to come together as one, e pluribus.
Yeah. There's a reason why each state has its own constitution. And, I bump into people that don't even know this, but every state has a constitution that governs their laws outside of what was enumerated to the government in Article 1, Section 8. So how does this transpire in today's society? If you want to talk about states' rights, let's talk about some of the issues that we found where you really could see people have a misunderstanding of states' rights, or the federal government is trying to seize power from the states and take their rights from them.
Well, you have your drug laws.
Drug laws.
Different states apply those their own drug laws to certain things. And what I've never really understood is, say one state can say medical marijuana is good or acceptable, and another one says that recreational marijuana is good, and this is how many plants you can have and how big a crop you can grow. But yet the DEA can come in and wipe you out and send you to prison.
Yeah.
How does that happen?
Again, that's federal overreach and power.
It just hasn't been challenged?
It is being challenged by the states that are legalizing marijuana now, and you're seeing some of that. There are states that are nullifying gun laws. A lot of the founders talked about your ability as a people to control the government. The government gets the power from you. Each one of you, when you wake up or when you're born in this country, you're born free with liberty. But you only have the liberty you're willing to exercise. If you're not willing to stand up and fight and be unafraid and push back against the powers of the federal government.
Right. If you just sit there and not say anything and say, oh, it'll take care of itself, you watch those freedoms just be eroded every day.
I see this a lot with a lot of good American citizens that I talk to. It feels in my heart like people are just waiting. Like one day a politician is going to come along and they're going to save us.
Right.
That's never going to happen. A politician isn't going to save you. You have to make the politicians do what is constitutionally correct. And if they don't, you have to be willing to fight against them to get them out of office, which in today's society with the funding that goes into federal races especially, you see some of these where they're spending $2 or $3 million. Your average citizen doesn't have a chance. It's interesting. here in Montgomery County where we're at, our congressman is Kevin Brady. And last time I checked his financials, I think it was about 4 years ago, about 87% of the money that he raised for his PAC was from outside the state of Texas. And it's fascinating when you look at bills when they vote for like a medical bill or NAFTA or something like that.
Look and see who their donors are.
That's right. You can see who the donors are. And it's generally people that have an interest in getting these laws passed because it's going to benefit their business some way. Because in reality, a lot of people, even though we don't like to believe it, don't have the best interests of freedom at mind. They have the best interests of themselves and the best interests of make as much money and live the lavish lifestyle that you see on TV. But for the everyday people that go to work and just want to get by and make sure your kids are happy and your family's healthy, you don't have the ability to interact with these federal congressmen.
Yeah, it's really kind of become an us and them sort of situation.
Yeah, so
like Beto O'Rourke, your favorite Hispanic from El Paso, is here going to run again for governor.
He is running again. He's on the
ballot. His money
ballot.
comes from Hollywood, California, and the East Coast. There's
Beto,
no groundswell for Beto here.
Beto actually just got $1 million from George Soros. And people that don't know, I'm sure if you're watching the show, you know who George Soros is, but I'll just say it. Basically, he's a fascist. He likes to destroy governments and freedom for power.
All over the world.
He did damage to Great Britain long ago. He's doing damage to us now. He's really pushing in your local communities for district attorneys. You see a lot of these district attorneys that are not enforcing the laws and not supporting people. That's a George Soros underground campaign movement.
Mayors, prosecutors, commissioners, county commissioners. Yeah.
During voting season, you'll see him open a lot of outreach centers to try to sway votes in elections, get people maybe to vote invalidly. Voting is a big one that's with the states, and a lot of people, they don't know, but Article 2 gives the states the state legislatures, the right to control voting. And it was fascinating, when I was watching the January 6th stuff, about President Trump, they were talking about how he made calls to states to have them check their ballots, and he's trying to sway the election. Well, that's who he's supposed to call. That's who's in charge of the elections inside their state. What would be the bigger question that people should ask is, why did you have Secretary of States and governors modify voting laws because of COVID before the election when they don't have the authority constitutionally, federally, or inside their state to do so?
They didn't follow their own constitutions.
That's right, and nobody seems to be concerned with that. The drop boxes, they put up all these drop boxes for people to come in. Those are supposed to have cameras on them. We found out a lot of them didn't have the cameras working. The ones that did, you can see people stuffing ballots in the drop boxes.
Well, a lot of rules were overlooked and not followed. But the worst part about the whole thing is it seems to be against the law or the common law of the woke or the left to look into it and have an honest appraisal and audit. Although they've already done a recount. Well, if you recount the same bad ballots that were there fraudulently to begin with, possibly fraudulently,
yeah, a recount,
you're going to get the same number.
A recount's not going to affect any of these elections. The only way to affect it going forward is for the people to demand transparency. When you have people holding up screens to stop people from viewing the counts of the votes.
That ought to be front and center. I don't care if you're Republican, Democrat, Libertarian, or a Martian. Right is right, and that is wrong.
This is what I tell people. This is not a left or right thing. This is an American thing. And if you can't understand that if you get one invalid vote, you've negated somebody's actual vote. You've taken their liberty and their freedom to cast a vote away from them because someone else is cheating. And so I don't care who's cheating. I think as a people, we should strive to find out who's cheating, how they're cheating, and make sure that that doesn't ever occur again in this country. One thing I want to mention while we're talking about voting is the difference. So this January 6th thing kind of bothers me personally. I find it interesting they keep using the word insurrection.
There's a reason for that.
There's a reason for that. So the 14th Amendment mentions that if you were involved in an insurrection, you can never run for public office again. But it would be the first insurrection I've read of historically where no weapons were used.
The great unarmed insurrection of 2021.
What's really fascinating about it is the media coverage and the people who push back against any outside thought or opinion on it because they hate Donald Trump. And I'm not here to tell you to support Donald Trump or hate Donald Trump. Each one of us as a grown human being with a brain can make our own decisions for what's best for you in your life. What I am telling you is look at the history and the facts. January 2020, you had a bunch of people charge the Capitol and break into the building. They didn't injure anybody. I think one of the protesters was shot by Capitol Police.
That was the only death.
Which was interesting.
When it was first reported, it was the deadly insurrection where 5 or 6 people had died. Not true, but pushed.
Yeah, and then what's fascinating is if you go back and look, which is easy in the day of the internet, in January 2017, when Trump won, there were also protests in D.C.
Oh, my God.
They almost burned half the city down. I believe 5 police officers were injured by the protesters.
Yeah.
I don't know if anybody was arrested, but I do know that nobody was charged with insurrection or a crime. Nobody was punished for those riots. It's kind of like the big riots in 2020 that we saw.
Oh, yeah. Over 500 riots in the summer of 2020, and everybody looked the other way. In fact, Kamala Harris had a fund to help the people that were arrested in those riots, I think in Minnesota.
Yeah, I saw a lot of politicians out supporting the riots and telling people to get in the face of conservative and Republicans. And this is the dangerous rhetoric. Now, with free speech, they have the right to say it. But as voters, we should recognize that and understand that do we really want, as much as I hate the other political party, do I really want somebody inciting that kind of hatred?
Right.
Because I would expect conservatives to stand up against a conservative who did that.
These are just fundamental things that should be important to everybody, no matter where you stand.
That's right. Another issue that's a state issue that is very hot topic is abortion. And the Supreme Court just ruled on this. And it was interesting to me because I felt like people in the United States had lost their mind. I mean, they literally on social media were acting like they were going to be dead the next day if they couldn't go out and get an abortion. And so I want to discuss this without actually talking about the merits of abortion. Whether you're for or against it, that's on you. Let's talk about the constitutionality of it and what the Supreme Court did.
That's what they judged, the constitutionality of Roe versus Wade from 1973. And that's been on shaky ground. Even Ruth Bader Ginsburg said that doesn't really fly. But it made it to the Supreme Court recently, and it was deemed unconstitutional to be federalized.
It's not a federal issue.
It's a state issue.
We read the 18 enumerations earlier. I don't remember abortion being one of them.
That was
I don't
one of them.
remember
So
health being one of them.
It automatically goes back to the states and the people. And I say, no matter where you stand, you can go and vote in your state for your own representatives to reflect your own opinions.
This is what the founders thought.
This is good news.
The founders thought that each state should be like their own little mini country inside of this constitutional republic. Each state would have vastly different laws because the federal government can only control the 18 enumerations. And you're seeing evidence of this play out. For all the people that lost their mind over the abortion, Kansas just had an election where I believe it was 59% of the voters voted to stop an abortion law. So they're going to maintain abortions in the state. And that's the way it's supposed to function.
That's up to the people of the state.
Of Kansas. And if you don't like it, you could move out of Kansas and move to another state. For instance, Indiana just had an election where they voted to be one of the most stringent pro-life states in the union. Mm-hmm. And this is the principle and the idea that people miss out on is just because you passionately believe something doesn't mean that you should work politically to enforce your beliefs on the rest of the country. That stifles freedom.
But I think people need to know what they're talking about. The Supreme Court did not outlaw abortion. You see that all over the place.
Yeah.
The Supreme Court and all those conservatives on the Supreme Court have outlawed abortion and we're all going to die. Well, that's not the case. It goes back to the states as it should.
Yeah.
You know, and if everybody agrees with you, then the states will reflect that.
I still believe the majority of states allow abortion currently.
Yeah.
Some of the states allow third trimester. And if I'm correct on what I've read, I believe we're only one of like 5 or 6 countries in the world that allow those late-term abortions. Most people, when you talk about, Germany and Spain and countries in Europe, it's 12 weeks. I think UK is 20 weeks. Most people go around the heartbeat laws. And that's a debate for people in their own. That's not what this show's about. We're talking about the constitutionality of things. Another one is education. So this one really fascinates me because education is a state issue. It's always been a state issue. It does not belong in the federal government. But for whatever reason, I think it was for school lunches, they started the Department of Education. And that massive, like every government program once started, never ends. Reagan said it's the closest thing to internal life. They spend a lot of money, and they're forcing curriculum down on people with the critical race theory, Common Core.
LGBTQ, XYZ, yeah, for little kids.
And a lot of this has happened. There's a multitude of reasons. One, some states have massive teacher unions that donate almost exclusively to one party over the other. But you have to ask yourself, these teacher unions, are they doing what's best for the school and the kids, or are they doing what's best for them? And then you should ask yourself too, I know here where we are, the school taxes are pretty high. Mm-hmm. And I keep seeing all these new schools go up that are these massive cathedrals. But
palaces, yeah.
Yeah, and you know, what happened to just educating the kids? But education should be controlled at a state level by the people in the state. And it's up to the citizens to decide who's on their school board, mm-hmm. Who's in charge of their schools, what kind of policies are set from the state level.
And that's what this show is all about.
We're trying to help people understand how this is supposed to work. Another one is marriage. Gay marriage was a big one mm-hmm. that got pushed at the federal level. And I'm not telling you I'm for or against gay marriage. Personally, I don't care one way or the other. I think freedom is freedom. People should be free, but it's not a federal issue.
I think those poor bastards have gotten everything they asked for. Okay, you want to get married? You've had it now, buddy.
Yeah, and so that upsets people when you talk about it. But again, if you want to protect liberty and freedom, you can't just protect it for the things that you agree with. You have to always strive to protect liberty and freedom.
Right.
Another one that is a hot issue to me is the federal land. People, I think most citizens don't recognize how much land the federal government actually owns.
Well, ANWR, for one thing. The leasing rights in the Gulf, I don't know if that's considered land ownership or ocean ownership.
I think they own like 57% of Nevada.
Yeah.
I could be wrong. I'll have to look that up after the show, but I think it's like 57% of Nevada. Now, of course, most of it's desert. But the Constitution didn't really authorize the government to own that much land. And you mentioned ANWR, that's where it becomes a problem with the oil. People talk about, oil prices going up. That's because the first day of the current administration with President Biden, they stopped issuing permits to drill on federal land. So, we need to address, why does the federal government own so much land? What happened to our property rights? I mean, the original was life, liberty, and property. I mean, mm-hmm. They changed it to pursuit of happiness, but property was important to the founders. The ability to own a piece of property that was yours, to live in peace and do what you felt you wanted to do to be free.
As long as you weren't hurting anybody else or hurting anybody else's rights. You had a right to pursue your own happiness.
Yeah. You got another one for us?
Well, what have we got here? States' rights going back to 1850. Might struck a nerve. The Fugitive Slave Act.
Okay.
Where the government, the federal government, came in and said that even if a slave escaped the South to the harbor of the North mm-hmm. and felt safe, that they were still property and had to be returned. So that trampled on those states' rights, saying, hey, there's no slavery here, so this guy's free. They argued about that all over the place. That was one of the things leading up to the Civil War.
Yeah.
And that's states' rights.
It should have been, once they were in another state, they should have been free to stay in the state. They should have been free to begin with. But
exactly.
We can't modify history.
So the emergency powers, let's see. Emergency powers.
Okay.
You've seen a lot of that lately. We touched on that with the pandemic and everything. That violates the 10th Amendment. You can't just, with a stroke of a pen, call something an emergency and mandate behavior.
Well, Mark, the government loves emergencies because every time there's an emergency, they get more power. They put you in a bubble of fear where you're afraid to do things, i.e. COVID. Now they're talking about monkeypox. I think Biden just declared an emergency for monkeypox. And I think there's 6,000 active cases in the U.S. That's
if you follow the science on the monkeypox, you'll find out how that's transmitted I don't think we have anything to be afraid of.
I think if people just would educate themselves on it, the monkeypox could go away very quickly.
Yeah.
But, people want to live in their bubble. They want to be free to do what they want, but it's not a national emergency to declare from the presidency. Again, they realize how much power they can get when we're afraid of something. And so what I try to tell people is you need to be unafraid, definitely unafraid of your government. You need to stand up for your rights and fight for what you have.
Yeah. Well, I keep saying, yeah.
Yeah.
But, and we've gotten an email, we get a bunch of emails. One of them was kind of beating up on us a little bit about, well, you're just two guys who agree and you're basically just saying the same monologue and there's no division there whatsoever. So I will have to beg to differ with that. It was Gary from Indiana. It's not from Gary, Indiana. So I don't know, bug tussle or something. So Gary in Indiana, here's some division and fighting for you. Craig, that shirt is appalling. Did you lose a bet or something?
Yeah, I think I stole this shirt, or maybe somebody in the government gave it to me.
Oh, okay.
Free hand-me-down.
So there you go, Gary. That was for you.
Yeah. So I do want to mention we got a comment on one of our pages about inflation from a Meg G, I believe it was. And so just to let you know, I got your comment. I definitely love talking about inflation, the monetary system, coinage, some of the stuff the government has the right to do and how they've really messed that up. So we're going to throw that in our next episode. So for you, if you're interested in inflation, monetary policy in the U.S., banking, Federal Reserve, gold standard, things like this, that's going to be the item that we talk about next time, because I think people will be interested to find out that inflation really hurts the poor. When the government prints the money, it's the government cronies that make out like bandits on that.
Exactly.
So that's all I think we have for today.
Well, I guess we'll just wrap it up then. Thank you so much for being here. And if you haven't, I would love for you to like and especially subscribe. So for Craig McMichael, I'm Mark Hogan, and that's the way we see it. What do you think?